I'm Steve Paul. I am the Director of Visualization and Immersive Technology for AECOM's DCS Americas Marketing Group. I head up the Visualization Studio, AKA we call it the Viz Studio, for all that, within all of that. And our main reason for being the Viz Studio, that is, not AECOM, I'll explain our main reason for being here in a second. The Viz Studio's main reason for being is to create effective visual communication tools for our projects, for our pursuits, to bring those solutions to life. So we create 3D, 2D models, renderings, animations, videos, web design, and the reason I'm here today, XR experiences. So what is AECOM? AECOM is actually an acronym. Just a little bit of background here. AECOM is actually an acronym for Architecture, Engineering, Construction, Organization, and Management. It is a big multinational company. We have between 80 and 100,000 people worldwide on all 7 continents, including Antarctica. I think there's one guy in Antarctica there who does stuff for us. DCS Americas, the division that I work in, is Design Construction Services of the Americas, basically the Western Hemisphere. So that means that I do, in theory, visualization, or my team does visualization for basically everything between Iceland and Guam. Although not Iceland or Guam. Those are done by EMEA, Europe, or Asia Pacific. We do mostly the Western Hemisphere, North and South America. In practice, however, it's mostly North America, the United States and Canada, but we do work across all of our various and sundry business lines and regions. So we have a whole bunch of stuff that we do. This is how you get in touch with me. If any of you want to get in touch with me, you can see we have a website, aecomviz.com, and there's my email and our portfolio up there. It's really interesting to hear. I was sitting in on this last panel and watching the presentation in the main room there, and it just seems like some of these enterprise companies are huge monolithic beings. And sure, that's kind of true, but I think for AECOM, for us, I think of it more of like a city, a small city of 80,000 or so. And we're a small visualization shop within a neighborhood within this city. And so on my team, we have 9 of us, including me. And some of us have various specialties, you know, video or web development, coding, things like that. But we really have to kind of eke out our progress with XR. We've had to do that sort of tooth and nail almost. Not quite so dramatic, I hope, but we are not in a position in the C-suite, as it were, to really move that forward. But I want to share with you some of our journey to making that happen. And especially, as it says on the sign out there, how we went from a visualization team to being able to provide training in virtual reality, slip, trip, and fall in this case. All right, so moving on here, this is just some of the stuff, a little bit of a context of the things that we do, graphics and 3D renderings and animation of roads, of bridges, of architecture, of stadiums, even the Dallas Dart there. So that's what we still do. And in fact, that's our day job. This is another one here that we have started to do, that we've done, again, talking about traffic management of the future. Okay, and this is just by way of, again, laying a little bit of groundwork for who we are. This was an interactive video that was at a conference, much like this one, and the users were able to go up to a touchscreen monitor and choose the path, choose their own adventure kind of a thing. And they were able to choose which point in the future they could see this traffic management center. Now, I just showed that, again, as context for where we're coming from with all of this. But I wanted to focus a little bit more here now that I've used up almost 5 minutes of my time, and I know we're running a little bit behind time, and I don't want to delay lunch for anybody. So I want to talk about how we got from Viz to VR. All right, this is our demo reel for some of our immersive material here. Just to, again, sort of by way of context. And the first thing you're going to see is a public awareness booth at Waterloo Station in London, where we allowed commuters to stand in this spot and see what Waterloo Station would look like after its proposed renovation. This is an immersive train ride along a proposed light rail in Washington, D.C. And this is an interactive virtual apartment that the user could go through and interact with different objects, including a dog that was in there, by the way, too. We got to have the family pet in there. But the meat and butter, the bread and butter, meat and potatoes of what we do is a little bit more industrial in many cases here. So this is a gas plant, and I'll get back to that particular one in a second here. This is an interior design of an office. Interiors are fun to do for virtual reality, for visualization, and again, that's our specialty. We're not necessarily IT people. We're not even construction engineers. Most of my team were computer animators, filmmakers, artists. My undergraduate, I'm the manager, director of all that. My undergraduate degree was in English, so I'm completely hopeless and unemployable, I'm afraid. But, but what we do is we learn and we translate that to our stakeholders, the people outside there. So I'll talk about some of these other things here in a second. I'm just going to let this play through a little bit. And again, you can see some of these things. We have a variety of platforms that we have delivered on. In the last panel, I think it was Allison, was her name up here, said how important it was for some of these 360-degree static renders and movies, videos, were to getting in touch, to communicating with our public, with the stakeholders. But you can see here too, we've done everything from the Google Cardboard all the way up to working with the HoloLens. And I'll talk about that here once this plays out here a little bit. So as I say, we are a small group, and we have to always, again, serve our customer. We have to meet our utilization rates. So we have to kind of squeeze this in and find out what it is that our stakeholders, that our clients really want. And in order to do that effectively, what we found is that it's useful to understand the technology. Now, this is a slide I typically show when I'm trying to explain, well, what's the difference between augmented and virtual reality? What do you mean by mixed reality and all of that? I'm assuming you guys all know that, right? Yeah, okay. In this case, I want to just talk about, these are the platforms that we have delivered to. And on the left, it's not just augmented reality, but it's also mobile, and it's web-based. And that is hugely accessible and easy to do. We can use those 360-degree renders with hotspots and gaze navigation to create very robust and interactive experiences that can be easily distributed regardless of operating system, browser, without an app even installed. You just go to the website and it opens up, and you can look at it either on your desktop, on a mobile device, or you can hit the little icon there and pop it into Google Cardboard. Now, some of these that we've used in the past, things change very quickly. So Samsung no longer supports the Gear VR, so that's ancient history. And DAQRI is now out of business or closing its doors shortly here too. They've stopped supporting that. So we're not going to be using those. But we are very much using, of course, the web-based VR. Cardboard's not going away. And particularly for training purposes, we use the Rift and the Vive. We also have some teams, and my team doesn't do it as much, working with the HoloLens, doing our own programming out in Los Angeles. I'm actually based in Minneapolis, the other end of 35 here. But they do, as they said in the last panel discussion here, my team in LA, working with the HoloLens, programs their own. They create custom apps for it. And these are quite useful. But we've also had, we're not using that as much for training purposes. What we do use is the Rift, or my personal favorite, and I think what works very well is the Vive. All right, so I'll explain some of that in a second here. So that's me, the short guy. The tall guy is a supervisor down at the Savannah River nuclear plant. And he actually works on the site that we created this slip, trip, and fall hazard for. So I'll come back to this in a minute here. So I wanted to talk a little bit, actually I'm going to go back to this a little bit here and just kind of talk about why I think VR especially works for training purposes. Now you can see this guy is completely immersed. He's got the headphones on, he's got the headset, he's not really seeing. And what that does is it completely immerses the user, as you all know. But how does that work neurologically? I'm fascinated by this. My profession is as a visualization artist. My passion is as an educator. I was an educator before I joined AECOM. I love to understand how we learn and perceive things. And what we're working with, as some of you know, I'm sure, is the vestibular system and the hippocampus. And of course, the vestibular system, the reason why people get motion sickness or got motion sickness when they had on VR headsets, a common complaint, and one of the things that held us back originally was because their movement was not syncing up to what they were seeing. So when we use something like the Vive, however, which does allow you to move in and out, and again, if it's created correctly, follows your head movements, follows the movement of your body within that virtual space. That clues our vestibular system into thinking, okay, everything's fine. This is normal. That's great, because then your hippocampus kicks in. And the hippocampus is what controls our spatial awareness in three-dimensional space. But it also ties in to our emotional centers and our retention, our learning. So you combine all of that, and you've got a pretty effective platform. In fact, as I said, I was an educator before this, so this is, learning pyramid. We've all seen this Bloom's taxonomy, basically. And we know that practicing by doing is the best way to learn. When you're in virtual reality, it's almost as good as doing it. You perceive it that way. It fools your hippocampus into thinking you're actually doing it. And now, with the consumerization of all of this stuff, there's plenty of things out there. There's plenty of academic studies, really peer-reviewed studies that prove how effective this is. Much more effective than traditional methods, paper, PowerPoint, anything like that. Look at how much it's adopted by industry. Next door, the whole room dedicated to training in XR. How did we get here? Well, this was a case study, a pretty good example of the early days. We created a gas plant, again, another gas plant here, that was being designed, and we showed the designer and engineers, here's what it's going to look like. And we actually put it into VR, into a Gear VR headset. And we placed them in different places around there, and they started saying, well, this is too tight a space, I can't work here. Oh, we have to go back and do that. So that created the need. We saw that as a need. So we created another thing that was suggested again by the client, and this was a sort of a training test for hydrostatic testing the pressure in a pipeline. How do you do that? How do you train? This is great because now the user, again, you've got this multiple choice up here, multiple choice test, basically, quiz about how to go through this. But the user can actually go in and look at the various pieces of it. You've heard this many times, I'm sure, the last day and a half here. This is very effective learning. When they can actually see it, when it has that kind of presence, when they're totally immersed in it. All right. Another piece that was brought to us by the client was actually began as a visualization of a dam somewhere in a war zone. And this is actually a tunnel underneath the dam along a river somewhere near the cradle of civilization. I'm not allowed to say where. But under this dam, of course, we're helping to drill holes in the bottom of it, inject mortar into the bottom to fortify this dam. But it's in the middle of a war zone, and until a little while ago, it was occupied. It's a confined space. It's scary to be there. So how do you get people to feel more comfortable when they get there? Put them in that situation before. So we took scans, we took photos, we took audio that was recorded in that tunnel and made it into a VR experience. And it's become a very good tool for us to understand how to use confined spaces. We've also done the same thing for heights and for electrical boxes, all these other great things, but that's not why I'm here. So let's keep moving here again. One other thing here too. As we move along, as I said, the hippocampus is also engaged in emotion, right? And that's tied in with learning. So this is a more mundane setting. This is actually our office in Minneapolis. We created a fire escape, a fire exit drill, and really ramped up the emotional factor, the stress factor. We have people screaming and running around, and there's sirens going and stuff like that. I think somebody put in a flaming goat once, but we took that out. And if you don't get out or you start making the wrong decisions, your vision blurs. And if you don't get out in time, you die. Very effective, a little overdone perhaps, but very effective. And that's something that I wanted to point out, is that by engaging people's emotions, you can also make a very fun and lasting impression. So let's move on there. That one's looped. So we took what we learned with the fire escape, and we were hired by an oil company, gas and oil company, to create a training for their gas plants. What happens in their gas plants when there's a leak in one of the pipes and it is a fire risk? Well, here you have to bring up the appropriate screens. This is a control room, just like they would find on the refinery plant. You have to bring up the screens and you have to open and close the valves in the proper order, because if you don't, the alarms continue to go off and intensify, and ultimately, the plant blows up. And we incorporated the whole thing, the noise and everything, even put the vibrations in the hand controllers. And every single person who I saw do that, whenever they got to that point and they made a mistake and the plant blew up, they were just, but they took off the headset and they were like, that was amazing. Oh my God, I'm gonna do it again. It engaged them. And engaging your audience is critical. And I think that's something that we often forget, is what's the value of engaging our audience? So it's got a little bit of a game quality to it. Now on to the main subject here. This is Google Earth, a portion of the Savannah River nuclear site. It's one of the oldest, if not the oldest, nuclear refineries in the world, I think. It was in the 50s, maybe even 48, I think might have been built. It was originally made for creating, atomic bombs, basically, that kind of stuff. And it's aging, and they're remediating it. They're shutting it down and trying to deal with all the fun stuff that comes with that. But our task was to create among others, once we finally decided on it, create a slip, trip, and fall for one of these tank tops. And these tank tops are about 90 feet across. So that presents a lot of challenges. And it's limited access as well. So I couldn't really go down there and look around and measure stuff on these tank tops. Fortunately, we did have somebody who could help us. But what we came up with, again, for slip, trip, and fall, I want to go back to this guy again. What we came up with for that is we put two controllers, one on each foot, one on the belt there, as well as the hand controllers and the head. And they're driving an avatar inside the experience. And as they're walking across, they have to step over tripping hazards, avoid slipping hazards, duck if they're going to hit a headbang hazard, and identify other hazards in that area. So there were some challenges with that here. So let me just go back to how we got the information. Again, my team is mostly 3D modelers. We do visualization. So we modeled up, this is a 360-degree photograph taken by somebody officially down there on the site with the clearance and everything to go through it. And we modeled up this tank top and put in all the hazards that they would normally find, those pipes down there with the black and white zebra stripes, the tank tops, the hatches, the liquid that may or may not be seeping from the nuclear waste underneath. All of these things added up to hazards. And here's a little screen capture. Again, this is what the viewer is seeing. And one of the things that we did with this was to gamify it. So it is a video game, basically. You have to score a certain amount. And you score by identifying hazards or by avoiding hazards. If you trip over a hazard, obviously we hadn't quite gotten to the point yet where we had actual physical things that they would trip over. But if you actually walked through one of those yellow and black conduits, you would lose points. And you had to get to that little blue circle that you saw in there. And that served a dual purpose. One of the things about the Vive, which is what we were using for this, because of its 6 degrees of freedom, because you have the trackers that you're able to grab things with and manipulate things, and we were able to put it on their feet and their waist and drive this avatar. But the Vive has a limited space. It's not 90 feet, I can tell you. It's more like 15. So what we had to do was create a safe walking path. Again, part of their safety training. And that safe walking path extended about 12 feet. So if my workstation is over here, that's powering and driving this thing, and I have the headset on, and I'm walking towards my goal over here, I'm avoiding the hazards along the way, I get into that goal, great, boom! I'm transported to those little interstitials that you see. Those little animated movies are a refresher course. They demonstrate the points of safety, of what they either have just gone through or what they're about to go through. So they're facing this way. They were walking this way and along across that tank top, this direction. When they get to this stuff and they want to see that, those screens are actually behind them. So they have to turn around this way and watch that. Then when they're ready to go, they go back into the tank top and they think virtually they're facing that way, but physically they're facing this way. So when they walk to their next safety goal along that safe path, they're actually backtracking and pulling that cable behind them. They get to this goal, they turn around, watch another refresher movie, and walk back this way. So it was back and forth in the physical space and forward in the virtual space. So a lot of things that we ran into, and I see that I've got about 7 minutes left here, so I'm going to try and wrap this up so we have time for a few quick questions. But there were a lot of things that I think organizationally we went through that we had to deal with. Not just the security issues and the safety issues from the nuclear waste site, but also administrative issues. We actually are more internal to DCS Americas. Another part of AECOM, Management Services, is actually the team that brought us in to this. They have different accounting systems. So how could we charge our time to that? So that was something that I think we overlook a lot. We get so involved with what we're doing that we don't always see those administrative issues. But it's also, as I mentioned at the outset, we're a small group. We're not part of this big IT movement. You know, I heard the guy up here talking about he's got 75 engineers on his Immersive. You know, there's 9 of us, of which only 3 really do this stuff. And we have to do that outside of work. We have to create it on our free time because we're busy just doing that traditional visualization. So this was all created outside of work, but it also ended up being our work as well, too. So I guess I want to say to all of you out there, don't think of us as these enterprises, these big corporations, as completely monolithic. You know, in many ways, those of us like me and my team, we work kind of like a small business. We're a little shop, and it requires a good team and a lot of dedication and hard work to do it, but you can do it. So anyway, that's, I believe, it for me. There's my contact info again if you want to get back in touch with me. I've got 5 minutes on this clock. I know we're running late. Go for it. Okay. Any questions? Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Another question I have, you did say you have a small group of 9 people.
Yes.
However, it's 9 more than those companies.
True enough. Yeah, yeah.
So my question is, like for other smaller companies, how do you get those types of trainings? Because I come from construction industry and we always look for products that are ready to use.
Yeah.
I work with 3M and a few other OSHA trainings that I was able to purchase and train our workers.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything available for sale, or do you custom develop every single application?
Well, yeah, for us personally, we, I mentioned the kind of separation between, do we have, I guess I should repeat the question, I'm sorry. Yeah, the question is, do we have anything that we sell as a team out there to the Yeah. 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 I'm afraid we don't have a retail version of anything right now. As I say, I mentioned that we work within DCS Americas and AECOM, and that sometimes it can be confusing, but we always manage to find a way. So, if you want, and right now it is sort of all customized, but we have templates that allow us to put these things together. Like the hazard ID case, we have done about a dozen of those in various types and with their various needs, in various situations and so. Absolutely. I know. It is. Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Kind of going off of that, I'm also in construction.
Yeah.
Our biggest thing is OSHA. So when you did
Right.
that, was it just like a test case to see what would happen, or have you done anything to try and reach out and see if at some point this could fill an OSHA or other type of safety requirement?
Oh.
Replacement for a computerized training.
Okay. So the question is, does this fit with OSHA regulations, basically? Yes. It does, absolutely, yeah. That was one of the big challenges that we had at the Savannah River, was that they had very strict rules of things that had to be fixed. And so, yeah, there was a lot of back and forth. Is this gonna fit? Is this appropriate? Does this work with it, with OSHA? And yeah, AECOM is, architecture, engineering, and construction. So OSHA is a really important factor for us. And if anybody's going to Autodesk University, I'm going to be talking a little bit there at our booth about some of the stuff we're doing with this for construction, especially. Because even though we started it as just this little group of people kind of fighting our way through, now we've got the whole company is looking at us and saying, what can we do to help? How can we build this up? So again, keep at it, you guys, keep at it. I'm out of time. All right, thank you guys.